Hi everyone. Okay, so in this session, I'm going to show you how to use parameterization in JMeter. So what is parameterization? So parameterization means we can pass some parameters or inputs to the request. So when I perform our API testing or performance testing, we can pass certain parameters to your request. So that can be achieved by using parameterization concept in JMeter. So there are two kinds of parameterization we can achieve in JMeter. One is in internal parameters. So we can define some parameters internally in JMeter and we can use those parameters across all the requests. And there is another way. Suppose if you want to pass multiple parameters, then we can just create one CSV file. We can have all the parameters, list of parameters there, and we can read multiple parameters and then we can pass the same thing to the request. So this is also called as a data-driven test. So in this video, I'm going to show you both the approaches. So first, let us start with the JMeter internal parameters. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to use this particular uh, request here. This is basically a REST API and which needs API key to access all the functionalities of this REST API. And basically this is providing certain number of features. Let me show you the official website of this particular REST API. So they have provided a lot of functionalities, but we can access them only through API key. So that we need to generate here. So here, this is a website, Open Weather Map. So this particular website having a lot of APIs, and basically these are all REST APIs. And here we can get the weather information about the city based when I pass some city name or country name, and then by city ID or some geographical coordinates, we can pass different inputs, and based on that, it will give you the weather condition on that particular location. So this is the main functionality of this API. So to access this API, if you notice here, by city name and by city ID. So if you want to use this particular one, we need to pass city name along with the country name. And this is the request URL. And if you want to access the, if you want to know the weather condition on particular location based on the ID, we can also pass some ID here. And accordingly, it will give you exactly weather information. All right. So there are multiple APIs are available, but if you want to access all these functionality, we need an API key. So once you sign up here, so you can get the API key, and so you can also create a own API key. If you go to this particular location and the price, so here they have given some of the APIs are free, and you can see one button here, get API key and start. So as soon as you click here, it will ask you the sign up process, and then you will get an API key, right? So that API key can be used for some APIs and not for all. Okay, so now I have this API key already available here. I'm going to use this my API key to access those kind to request REST API request. All right, so now first of all, I'm going to show you the first approach, JMeter internal parameters. Okay, so before that, what I can do is I need to make ready of API call. So if you see this one, so here I have given some examples. By city ID, if you want to access this API, so by city name, so we need to give this URL data /weather ? And this is again query parameter. So here city and country we have to pass along with the app ID. App ID means is a API key which we have generated earlier. So this particular API will request the web service and give the response of weather condition. And similarly, by city ID. So here we can pass city ID and the app ID, then it will give you the weather condition. And this will also require the API key. All right. Now let us see how we can do this practically in JMeter. So in this concept, I'm going to use JMeter internal parameters. Okay, so this city, country name, app ID or ID, country ID, these things I will create as a parameters inside the JMeter. So let's go to JMeter. So currently I have a new test plan available. So under test plan, I'm creating a thread group. So this is a base thread group. And under this, first of all, I need to create a one HTTP request. So let me go to sampler, take HTTP request. So here I am creating HTTP request one. So the first request I'm going to create is get weather condition based on the city name. The other HTTP request I'm going to create is get the weather condition based on the city ID. Now let's go to HTTP request one. So here by city name, I'm just changing this request name by city name. So here we need to provide the server name and here path parameter. So let me just provide them. Okay, so here as per the condition here, if you just go back, so as per the definition of this particular API, as per the instructions, we need to pass exactly the same way, right? So I'm just using the same URL, and whatever API call they are saying, this is syntax they are saying, right? So this is exactly syntax they are saying. So I'm just copying it into my JMeter. So this particular portion is a domain, so that should be part of your server or IP. And this is a path parameter, and here we need to provide the city name and then country code, and accordingly it will give the information here, city name and the country code. So here I'm just giving some city name, and I'm just say city name is, let's say, Delhi, and the country code, or I'll say India IN, right? So these two parameters I'm passing, but this is also required API key. So as per my definition here, we need to pass and app key we need to also pass. So here I'm just adding and so then app ID. So this is another parameter, or you can also add that parameter under this particular list. Okay, so you can just add here, and here also you can add that parameter. Let's say add this app ID here, app ID. So my app ID is, I'm just copying here, right? So then in case I can just remove this one. All right, so now I have added this request, and parameters are required. So let's save this one, and I'm saving this plan here. This is params test plan, params test plan .jmx, right? I'm just saying, and also I will add so this is HTTP request. Okay, here itself I have just directly hard coded the parameters, and one parameter I'm passing it here. So far we haven't created any internal parameter except this app ID. So first let us verify this request goes well or not, and then I will also add one listener to see the report. Go to listener and view results tree. All right, so now save everything, and then I'm running this group, execute. Now my request is gone successfully, and now if you notice here, this is actual request which is sent. So this is city, country ID, app ID is equal to that license key, whatever key we have generated, that is going through this particular URL. So this is giving our response data. This is our weather condition information is provided here. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I will also create one more request, and let's go to again thread group and add sampler HTTP request, and here this request is by city ID, right? So by city ID, and here the API call is the syntax of API call is this one, and the domain should be part of server name, and this is a path parameter. Here we need to pass ID and app ID. So let me just use one ID here. So you can just go to this website and you can just get sample ID, and I'm just getting this particular ID, and you just substitute exactly here, ID and app ID. Also I can substitute directly here, or else you can add a parameter just like a first request. Okay, so this time I'm just adding this app ID directly here, right? And save this one. Now I have created two different requests, and let's clear the result, and one more time test it, and I will just create it at the bottom. Just drag and just go this up, and keep this report at the bottom. So now save it, clear everything, then execute. So on the view results, now we got the response from first one and also second one, right? So if you see the second one request, it is added weather ID and app ID along with this ID. So far I just created two HTTP requests, and in the both the HTTP requests I have requested the weather condition, but first request is depending on the name, and the second request depending on the ID. So now what I can do is I will just create some internal variable. So if you notice here, the first one and the second one, this URL is exactly the same, right? And also the app ID is also exactly the same. So in these cases, we can just create some parameters, and those parameters we can refer wherever you want to reuse those values, right? So what I can do is I will just create a few parameters there. So the one parameter is like URL. This parameter I will create. The other one is ID, app ID parameter I will create because this is also reusable. And if you want to create another city names, IDs and all, you can also create them. So let me just create parameters. So where we can create the parameters. So we can create internal parameters either plan level or group level or request level. All right. So if I create a variable inside the plan level, those variables can be referred inside multiple thread groups. And if I create a variables under thread group level, those variables can be used only within a thread. Similarly, if I create a variables under request level, so here those variables can be used only with that particular request. Okay. So currently I'm going to create variables at thread group level. Right click, add. So here we need to take one config element. Under this config element, user defined variables. Just take this one. So here we can add any number of parameters. I'm just going to add few parameters here. So first one is I'm just going to add city, and the second parameter is country. Next parameter is ID, and next parameter is API key, which is generated. Right, so 3-4 parameters I'm adding. So here API key which is generated. So I need to also fill all the details. So for example, let's say city is I will just say Delhi, and the country is IN India, and ID is whatever ID I captured. Okay, this is API key, and API key I'll put it here, and ID. So whatever ID I have used in my request, I can also put that ID as parameter here. And along with this, I will also add one more parameter, that is your URL as a parameter. You go and see here, this is the URL I'm using, right? So I will also keep that under parameters. I'm adding one more parameter here. This is URL, right? So 3, 4, 5 different parameters I have created now. All right. So this URL is optional, guys. If you want to have this one, you can have, or else we can use the same URL in multiple requests anywhere. Right, so you can have it or you can just remove it. So for now what I can do is rest of the parameters I will keep, because this URL I will pass every time. Okay, because these parameters, whatever I have defined, these parameters, city, country, after this example I will also take one more example which will take this data from CSV file, right? So for that reason I'm just removing this parameter and just delete this one. So currently I have this one. So later, if you want, we can add a URL also. So currently I have a city, country, ID, and API key. So these are all parameters, guys. So keep these parameters listed at the top of the thread group. Then these parameters we need to use in these two requests. So how we can use it? So here parameter names are city, country, ID, API key, right? So now first go to first request. So here I'm just using this server name as it is. Now here Delhi in, right? So these are the two parameters. The first one is city, the second one is a country. So how we can replace them? So if you notice the actual format, so previously we have sent the request, right? So this is actual format which is sent. So it is added API key at the end. At end symbol, app ID is equal to something, right? So here also I will add and, right? So app ID is equal to dollar symbol. I need to refer that variable. API key I have to refer. And here Delhi and in, that is also we need to get it from parameters, right? So dollar symbol, curly braces. The first one is city and comma, dollar symbol in the curly braces. The second one is country. So now Q is equal to city, comma, country I have added. These are values coming from the parameters which we have already defined in the user defined variables, and app ID, so which is coming from API key. So here in this particular request I have used city, country, and then API key. So I can just remove this one from here. I don't record this. So city, country, and API key, whichever I created here, city, country, API key. So ID I will use in another request. So for now, this is my request. I have substituted city, country, and app ID. And similarly, whatever I created another ID here, that will be used in next request. Go to by city, and here instead of this one, I'll any app ID is there. This will also I will get it from parameters list. So here ID is this one. So instead of this, I will just say dollar curly braces, let's say ID. Now the value which I have defined in the user defined variables will be substituted here, and app ID also I will get it from variables. So dollar symbol curly braces. This is API key I can specify. So that's it, guys. So in the first request, I have referred all the variables, that is city, country, and app API key. And in the second request, also I have referred this ID and also API key. So I have defined user defined variables. So we have used city, country, ID, and API key. All the variables we have used. Now clear this one. Now save my request again. So currently I don't have any data here. So let me execute. So now I have executed. Now we can go to view results tree here. By city name, if you see here, it is taken Delhi, India, and app ID. It is giving some response data here. Okay, this is the weather condition of that particular city. And by ID also we got some information. If you see the request type, and it is added weather ID here. Okay, so these are all internal parameters. So we can just specify the parameters, list of parameters here, and we can use these parameters anywhere in your request. So basically this approach used to reusability. So if you want to use some value everywhere in every request, we can just create one more config controller here, user defined variable, and where you can find it here, right click here, add config element. So user defined variables are config element, which we need to add here and derive all the list of variables. And as I said before, these variables can be created at plan level, group level, thread group level, or request level. All right. So this is the first way of doing parameterization. So we can pass these parameters to your request. So the next one is I will show you how to pass parameters to the request through CSV file. So we can also specify the parameters in CSV file, and then we can read the values in your request. So for now, what I can do is let's go to somewhere, and I created some data.csv file. So if I open this particular CSV file, which contains some value, so I have listed out multiple cities. I want to execute the same request with multiple sets of data. Okay, this is basically data driven. So we can execute the same request with multiple sets of data. So I have list of countries here, and the API keys are specified, same API key, and countries are different, and ID is specified here. We can also add multiple IDs. So this is my test data. So whatever parameters I have defined internally, 4 variables, same variables, this time I'm taking from Excel file. So what is an advantage here is we can get multiple sets of data. So that's a major advantage of using CSV file. So now I have 3 different type of cities and countries are there. So same 2 requests I will execute using these particular columns. So number of cities, API keys, countries, as well as IDs. So once you created this particular CSV file, and you can close this one and keep this particular CSV file somewhere in your location. So let me just close it. Okay, so I have saved as well as I closed, and that particular file is available under data.csv. Now go to JMeter. So for now, I'm just disabling this one, user defined variable. So currently the same request again. So we have to pass parameter in the same way, but this time we need to get these values from CSV file. Now go to thread group again. Now right click here, go to add one more config element, that is CSV Dataset Config. So this particular config element which we need to add, CSV Dataset Config. So keep the same before, and so here CSV dataset will give you some window like this. Here we need to browse a file. So click on the browse. Wherever your CSV data file is available, just open the file. And basically it is CSV file. So based upon the terminators, like sometimes comma, sometimes space, sometimes tab space will be there. Accordingly, we need to select proper values here. So for now, this purely CSV file, and all the columns are separated with comma. So I'm just having as it is data. So now I specified this CSV file and save it. That's the only thing you have to do, guys. So now these requests will get these values from this particular CSV file. And let's execute and see now. Go to your thread group again. The user defined variables have disabled this one. Okay, now currently this is enabled. Let's execute now and you can see the few results. So it is getting failure. Now let us see why exactly it is failing, the reason behind this. Now go to this request, and what is the exact request it is sent as? Whether question mark London UK app ID is not substituting here. If you see here, API key directly it is printing. In both the cases, we are not getting API key, right? So why we are not getting this API key? Because so in CSV file, the column is little bit different. So let me open my CSV file. So here, this is in uppercase letter, right? So I'm just making as this API key in small letter and then save it. Okay. Now I have just saved city, API key, country, and ID I have saved, and then close it. Right. And one more thing is under city name is specified API key, exactly app ID is equal to API key and app ID is equal to API key. So perfect. Now let us execute and see one more time. So clearing the data and executing this one more time. So now these results are passed. So city name exactly is passing London, UK and app ID, and city ID is using ID and app ID. And one more thing you have to notice here is here in CSV we have 3 sets of data, right? So in CSV file we have multiple sets of data. Let me close this. So in CSV file we have multiple sets of data. But here, these 2 requests have executed only one line. First request is taken, right? Only it is taken, first request is taken only London and UK. But there are 2 other cities and countries are specified. Even in the cities also it is taking only one city, one ID, first ID. It is not taken rest of the ID. So what we need to do is, if you want to repeat the same request for multiple sets of data from CSV file, we need to just repeat this one. So thread group, go to thread group and increase this loop count. So currently I have 3 records. So let me just put as a 3. So this is representing the iteration. So loop count is 3. Now this particular 2 requests will be executed 3 different times, and every time it will take a new set of data. Now I have added 3 here. Now again, clear everything, save and execute. Now we can see the first time city name ID executed, second time and third time. So if you notice this particular result here, first time it is taken London in UK, second time city name Delhi and India, third time again Hyderabad and India is taken. And even if you see the ID, so the first time, because we specify only same ID, so 3 times executed with the same ID. So if you want to repeat multiple sets of data, we need to just increase the thread groups here. We can say 3 here. So same request will be executed 3 times with 3 different types of inputs. So there are external parameters. So using internal parameters, we can hard code some data, and these variables we can use any of these requests and one time. And also, if you want to get multiple sets of data, we can create same variables in the CSV file, and using config element CSV Dataset Config, we can browse our particular file, get all the parameters, and same parameters I can pass wherever I require. So this is a syntax which we need to follow if you want to refer any variable, which can be either internal variable or external variable. And there are multiple options also there. In the request level, you can see the parameters tag. Here also you can pass parameters, but these parameters will be part of your request, and those parameters cannot be used for another request. Okay, so we can create these parameters at the plan level, thread level, request level, and everything. Okay, so that's all about parameterization. So we can do 2 types of parameterization using internal parameters we can define within the JMeter, and external parameters which we can define in the CSV file. We can get this data or parameters and we can pass it to your request in JMeter. Okay, so that's all for this video, guys. So thanks for watching.